I never thought the person who once held my hand through thunderstorms would be the one to leave me bleeding on a hospital gurney, but life has a way of teaching you that blood doesn't always mean loyalty. My name is Eleanor, I'm 63 years old, and the day I called my son for help after my heart surgery was the day I realized I'd spent 37 years loving someone who'd learned to see me as disposable. If you're watching this from anywhere in the world, drop a comment and tell me where you are. I need to know I'm not alone in this. And if you've ever felt invisible to the people you gave everything to, stay with me. This story gets darker before it gets lighter. Make sure you check the description box below. There are more stories like mine there, stories about betrayal, survival, and what happens when you finally stop shrinking yourself for people who wouldn't even pause their day to help you breathe. The thing about heart surgery is that it doesn't just crack open your chest. It cracks open every illusion you've been holding on to. I was lying in that recovery room with tubes still in my arms, my ribs aching like someone had taken a sledgehammer to my sternum, and all I could think about was hearing my son's voice. Just once. Just to know he cared. I reached for my phone with shaking fingers. My hands were so weak I could barely grip it, and I dialed his number. It rang 4 times. 4 times I sat there hoping. Praying, really. And when he finally picked up, I heard laughter in the background. A television. The clinking of dishes. Normal life continuing as if mine wasn't hanging by a thread. Mom. His voice was flat, distracted. I tried to keep my voice steady, but it cracked anyway. I told him the surgery was over. That I was alone. That the hospital said I needed someone to pick me up in a few hours because they couldn't keep me overnight. Insurance wouldn't cover it. I told him I was scared. I didn't say that last part out loud, but I think he should have heard it anyway. There was a pause. Not the kind where someone's thinking about how to help. The kind where someone's deciding how to say no without sounding like a monster. Mom, I can't. We've got plans tonight. Just call a taxi or an Uber or something. I felt something crack inside me that had nothing to do with my ribs. I tried to argue, told him I could barely move, that I was dizzy, that I didn't even know if I could walk to the curb by myself. And that's when I heard her. His wife, Lauren. Her voice was distant, like she was in another room, but it carried. It always carried. Tell her we're busy, babe. Honestly, life's been so much better without her hovering over everything. She laughed. Not a cruel laugh, not exactly. Worse. It was casual. Like I was a punchline they'd told 100 times before. Like my absence had been a relief they'd been celebrating for months. My son didn't correct her. Didn't defend me. He just sighed, actually sighed, and told me he had to go. Then he hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, the fluorescent hospital lights buzzing above me, and I realized I had become a burden so heavy that my own child couldn't carry me for a single evening. If you've ever felt that kind of abandonment, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Not because I need the numbers, but because I need to know there are people out there who understand what it feels like to be erased by the ones you built your whole life around. And check the description box for more stories like this one. You'll see you're not the only one fighting to be seen. I called a taxi. The driver was kind. A man in his 50s with a Jamaican accent who helped me into the back seat and didn't ask why I was crying. He saw the hospital bracelet, the way I winced when the seatbelt touched my chest, and he just drove in silence. When we pulled up to my house, he refused to let me pay. Said his mother had heart surgery last year and he couldn't imagine her going through it alone. I cried harder. A stranger had more compassion in 5 minutes than my son had shown in 5 months. That's when I started planning. Not revenge, not yet. But something. I didn't know what. I just knew I couldn't let this be the end of my story. I couldn't let them win by making me invisible. I spent the next 3 days in bed alone, feeling every beat of my newly repaired heart like it was ticking down to something inevitable. The pain wasn't just physical. It was the kind that settles into your bones and makes you question every decision you ever made. I kept replaying that phone call in my head, his voice, her laughter, the ease with which they dismissed me. I thought about all the years I spent raising him. The nights I stayed up when he had croup, holding him over a steaming shower because he couldn't breathe. The college tuition I paid by working double shifts at the hospital where I was a nurse for 30 years. The way I taught him to tie his shoes, to drive, to be kind. And somewhere along the way, he learned to be kind to everyone except me. Lauren wasn't always like this. Or maybe she was, and I just didn't see it. When they first started dating, she was sweet, or at least performed sweetness well enough to pass. She called me Mrs. Brennan, brought me flowers on Mother's Day, asked for my recipes. I thought I was gaining a daughter. But the moment they got married, something shifted. Suddenly, I was intrusive, overbearing, too involved. When I offered to help with their new house, she said I was overstepping. When I invited them to dinner, she had other plans. When I asked about grandchildren, she looked at me like I'd suggested something obscene. And my son, my sweet, sensitive boy, he just went along with it. He stopped calling unless I called first. Stopped visiting unless it was a holiday. Stopped seeing me at all unless I made myself impossible to ignore. But this? Leaving me alone after heart surgery? That was a new low. And the comment she made, that life was better without me, that burrowed into my mind like a parasite. I couldn't stop hearing it. I couldn't stop imagining them at home, laughing, toasting to their freedom from the inconvenient old woman who'd given up everything for them. And then, that evening, something happened. Something I didn't plan. Something I didn't even expect. My phone started ringing. Not once. Not twice. 10 times in 20 minutes. All from my son. All frantic. All suddenly desperate to reach me. I let it ring. I watched his name light up my screen over and over, and I felt a strange, cold satisfaction. Let him wait. Let him wonder. Let him feel, just for a moment, the helplessness I felt when he hung up on me. When the calls finally stopped, I checked my messages. There were 12. 12 messages from the man who couldn't be bothered to drive 15 minutes to pick me up from the hospital. The first few were confused. Mom, call me back. It's important. Then concerned. Mom, are you okay? Please pick up. Then panicked. Mom, please. Call me right now. I didn't call. I opened my laptop instead, slowly, because my chest still screamed every time I moved, and I searched my name. And there it was. Right at the top of the local news site. A headline with my face next to it. A face I barely recognized because it had been taken years ago, back when I still smiled like I believed the world was kind. The headline read, Local nurse receives $3.7 million settlement after hospital wrongful termination and medical malpractice cover-up. I stared at it. Read it 3 times. And then I started laughing. Not a joyful laugh. A bitter, disbelieving, almost hysterical laugh that made my ribs ache so badly I had to stop and clutch my chest. Because of course this was when they wanted to talk. Not when I was alone and afraid. Not when I needed help. But the moment I had money I'd fought for, bled for, spent 2 years in legal hell for, suddenly I was worth their time again. Let me back up. Because if you're wondering how a retired nurse ends up with a settlement that size, you need to know what they did to me. 3 years ago, I was still working at Mercy General Hospital in Richmond. I'd been there for 28 years. I was good at my job. No, I was excellent at my job. I knew every patient by name, every medication by heart, every protocol inside and out. But there was a doctor there, Dr. Richard Kellerman, who had a habit of cutting corners. Dangerous corners. I reported him twice for administering incorrect dosages, once for skipping mandatory checks, and once for covering up a surgical error that left a patient with permanent nerve damage. And instead of investigating him, the hospital investigated me. Said I was insubordinate. A troublemaker. They terminated me 4 months before my pension fully vested. 4 months. They tried to erase 30 years of my life in a single meeting. So I sued. I fought them with everything I had. And I won. Not just for wrongful termination, but for retaliation, emotional distress, and the malpractice cover-up I'd been screaming about for months. The settlement came through 2 weeks before my surgery. I hadn't told anyone. Not my son, not my neighbors, not even my attorney knew I'd kept it private. I wanted time to think. To plan. To decide what to do with a future I didn't think I'd have. And now, somehow, it had leaked. Someone at the hospital or the law firm must have talked to a reporter. And now my son, who told me to take a taxi, who let his wife mock me, who couldn't find 30 minutes in his day to make sure I didn't die alone, was calling me non-stop. If this story is hitting you hard, share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget, check the description box for more stories like mine. You'd be surprised how many of us are out here, surviving the people who should have protected us. I didn't answer. Not that night. I sat in the dark, my phone vibrating on the nightstand like a rattlesnake warning me of danger, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to let them take this from me. Not my peace. Not my money. Not my power. For the first time in years, I had something they wanted. And I was going to make them earn every single second of my attention. They showed up at my door the next morning. I heard the car pull into the driveway, heard the engine cut, heard the doors slam, heard their voices before they even knocked. My son was talking fast, nervous. Lauren was quieter, but I could feel her presence like a storm cloud rolling in. I stayed in my chair by the window, sipping tea that had gone cold an hour ago, and I waited. The knock came. 3 sharp raps, then my son's voice calling through the door. Mom? Mom, are you in there? Please open up. We need to talk. I let them wait. Let them knock again. Let them feel the edges of the panic I'd felt when I was lying in that hospital bed, wondering if anyone in the world still cared whether I lived or died. When I finally opened the door, I didn't smile. Didn't pretend. I just looked at them. My son looked awful, hair uncombed, eyes red-rimmed like he hadn't slept. Lauren looked calculated. Her face was arranged into something that might pass for concern if you didn't know her. But I knew her. I'd spent years studying the micro-expressions she thought I was too old or too stupid to catch. Mom. Thank God. We were so worried. My son stepped forward like he was going to hug me, but I stepped back. He froze. The air between us turned sharp. We saw the news. Why didn't you tell us? I took a slow sip of my cold tea and let the silence stretch. Then I said very calmly, tell you what? About the settlement. About the money. About everything. His voice cracked, and I wondered if he even heard himself. If he understood what he'd just admitted. That the only reason he was here was the money. Not my health. Not my surgery. Not the fact that I could have died alone on a gurney because he was too busy to care. Just the money. Lauren stepped in before I could answer, her voice dripping with false warmth. Eleanor, we had no idea you were going through all of that. The lawsuit, the stress, you should have told us. We would have been there for you. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I looked her dead in the eye and said, like you were there for me 3 days ago? Her smile faltered. Just for a second. But I saw it. My son jumped in, scrambling. Mom, I'm sorry about that. I know it was bad timing, but... bad timing. I set my mug down on the side table with a clink that felt louder than it should have. I called you after heart surgery. I could barely stand. I was terrified. And you told me to call a taxi. I didn't mean. And then your wife. I turned to Lauren, and I watched her face go pale. You said life was better without me. The silence that followed was the kind that swallows sound. My son's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Lauren's eyes darted to him, then back to me, and I saw the calculation happening in real time. She was deciding whether to deny it, to apologize, or to pivot. She chose pivot. Eleanor, I think you misheard me. I would never. I didn't mishear anything. My voice didn't rise. It didn't waver. It was steady and cold and final. I heard you laugh. I heard every word. And I heard my son say nothing to stop you. He looked like I'd struck him. Good. He should feel a fraction of what I felt. He reached for my hand, and I pulled it away. Mom, please. I know I messed up. But we're here now. Let us help you. Let us be here for you. Now that I have money. That's not, he stopped. Because he couldn't finish that sentence without lying, and even he wasn't shameless enough to lie to my face in that moment. Lauren, however, had no such limits. Eleanor, this isn't about money. We care about you. We've always cared about you. We didn't realize how much you were struggling. I told you I was struggling. I told you I needed help. And you laughed. Her face hardened. Just a flash, but I saw it. The mask slipping. The real Lauren underneath. I think you're blowing this out of proportion. And that's when I knew. I wasn't going to forgive them. I wasn't going to let them worm their way back into my life, make nice for a few months, and then start circling the settlement money like vultures. I wasn't going to let my son pretend he cared just because I was suddenly worth something in dollars and cents. I had spent decades giving, sacrificing, bending, and it had gotten me nothing but a hospital bed and a dial tone. I stood up, even though it hurt. Even though my chest felt like it was splitting open again. And I said, "Get out." My son blinked. "What?" "Get out of my house." "Mom, come on. You don't get to do this." My voice finally rose, shaking with years of swallowed anger. "You don't get to ignore me, abandon me, mock me, and then show up the second you think there's something in it for you. I am not an ATM. I am not a safety net for your financial planning. I am your mother. And you threw me away." Lauren's face twisted into something ugly. "You're being ridiculous. He's your son. You owe him." "I owe him nothing." I turned to her, and I let her see every ounce of the rage I'd been choking down. "I gave him everything. And you took him from me. So no, I don't owe him a damn thing. Now get out before I call the police." They left. My son tried to argue, tried to plead, but Lauren grabbed his arm and dragged him toward the door. She shot me a look on her way out, a look that promised this wasn't over. But I didn't care. Because for the first time in years, I had the power. And I wasn't giving it up. If you've ever had to cut someone out of your life to save yourself, you know how much it costs. Drop a comment if you've been there. And check the description box. You'll find more stories of people who had to choose themselves when no one else would. The weeks that followed were the quietest I'd had in years. No calls. No surprise visits. No fake apologies or guilt trip texts. Just silence. And at first, the silence felt like grief. Like I'd amputated a part of myself and was waiting for the phantom limb to stop aching. But slowly, the silence became something else. It became peace. I started walking again, short, careful walks around my neighborhood because my chest was still healing. I started calling old friends I'd lost touch with because I'd been too busy trying to be the perfect mother, the perfect grandmother in waiting, the perfect woman who never asked for anything. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since before my son was born. I wasn't good at it. But I didn't need to be. I just needed to make something that was mine. And the money? I didn't touch it. Not yet. I put it in an account and I sat with it. Because I wanted to be sure that when I did use it, it would be for something that mattered. Something that honored the fight it took to get it. I thought about donating some to a nursing advocacy group. Maybe setting up a scholarship for nurses who'd been retaliated against for speaking up. Maybe traveling. Really traveling, not the weekend trips I used to take where I worried the whole time about whether my son needed me for something. I thought about buying a small house somewhere warm, somewhere no one knew my name or my story, and starting over in a way that felt impossible a month ago. But then, about 6 weeks after I kicked them out, I got a letter. Not from my son. From Lauren's mother, a woman I'd met exactly 3 times in 8 years. The letter was short and cold, typed on expensive stationery, and it accused me of manipulating my son, of using my settlement to control him, of being a bitter, vindictive woman who was tearing their family apart. It said I should be ashamed. It said I was setting a terrible example. It ended with a line I'll never forget: "A mother's love should be unconditional, but clearly, you've put a price on yours." I read it twice. And then I laughed so hard I had to sit down. Because the audacity of it, the sheer, breathtaking audacity, was almost impressive. I was the one who put a price on love. I was the one who made it conditional. I, who had given 37 years of my life, my body, my money, my time, my sleep, my sanity. I was the one who couldn't love unconditionally? I wrote back. I didn't plan to. But I couldn't let it stand. I sent a single paragraph handwritten, on a plain piece of paper. I told her that unconditional love doesn't mean unconditional access. That I had loved my son unconditionally, but that didn't mean I had to accept being treated like I didn't matter. That I had every right to protect myself from people who only valued me when I was useful. And that if she wanted to talk about shame, she should ask her daughter why she thought it was funny that an old woman nearly died alone. I didn't hear back. But 2 weeks later, I got a call from my son. His voice was different. Smaller. He said he wanted to talk. Really talk. No Lauren. No agenda. Just him and me. I almost said no. But there was something in his voice, something raw and broken, that reminded me of the boy he used to be. So I said yes. We met at a coffee shop, neutral ground, and for the first time in years, he looked at me like I was a person and not a problem. He apologized. Not the kind of apology people give when they want something. The kind that comes with tears and shame and the awful realization that you've hurt someone you can't ever fully repair. He told me that Lauren's mother had shown him my letter, that it had started a fight, that he'd spent weeks thinking about what kind of man he'd become. He said he didn't expect me to forgive him. He just wanted me to know he was sorry. And he was trying to do better. I didn't forgive him. Not fully. Not yet. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's a long, slow process of deciding whether someone has earned the right to be trusted again. But I told him I'd think about it. That maybe someday, we could rebuild something. Not what we had before, that was gone, and we both knew it. But maybe something new. Something honest. He nodded. He didn't ask about the money. Didn't ask for anything. And when he left, he hugged me, carefully because my chest was still tender, and he whispered, "I love you, Mom." I don't know if he meant it. I don't know if it's enough. But I know this, I survived. I survived the surgery, the abandonment, the betrayal, the grief. I survived being erased and then reclaiming myself. And whether or not my son is part of my future, I'm going to be okay. Because I finally learned the hardest lesson of all. That you can't save people who don't want to be saved. That you can't love someone into seeing your worth. And that sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is walk away and let them figure out what they lost. If you made it this far, thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for seeing me. Drop a comment and tell me, where are you watching from? What's your story? And please, check the description box below. There are more stories like mine there, stories of survival and strength and women who refuse to disappear. Hit subscribe if this meant something to you. Because we're not done yet. None of us are.